Hey guys, it's Kemmerer, and today I'm going to be doing the best YA, sci-fi, and fantasy of 2019. Is part of my 2019 reading recap. If you missed the last video in this series, I will link it up in the cards for you guys. Additionally, links to all the videos in the series will be down in the description as the videos come out. You may have noticed from the title of this video that it is genre specific, and that's because when I was looking at all my favorite books of the year, they all ended up being adult fantasy, which I just felt like it wasn't fair to all of the other genres that I read, so I decided to do genre specific recap videos. This video is going to be talking about the most surprising and the best YA science fiction and fantasy books that I read this year. There are timestamps in the description if you guys want to jump around a little bit. We're going to be starting with the most surprising YA science fiction and fantasy books that I read this year. So the first books on this list is the Queen of the Tearling series by Erika Johannson, which includes Queen of the Tearling, Invasion of the Tearling, and Fate of the Tearling. So this series is about a character named Kelsey, who is a princess who was whisked away right after her birth, and she has been raised in exile. When she turns 19, she's returned to her kingdom so that she could take the crown, but there are a lot of political situations going on with her kingdom and things that are just not right for her people, and she has to try to basically build her kingdom back up again. I really enjoyed the series, especially Kelsey. The main character, Kelsey, is fantastic. I love her so much as a character. It's also a very interesting world because it's not our world. It's definitely set in kind of another world, but we're not sure really how it's related back to Earth or anything like that. And of course, we find out eventually. And in some of the later books, we get a lot of characters from other time periods, and we get to see kind of how the history of the world happened as the time goes on. And I really enjoyed that aspect of it also. So I did really enjoy this series. And as a series overall, I would give it 4 stars. The next book on this list is The Darkest Part of the Forest by Holly Black. This book I picked up on a complete whim because I had recently started the Folk of the Air trilogy and I really loved it. So this book is set in the same world as that trilogy. And our main character of this book makes a deal with the fairy, which of course we know we shouldn't do that. And so they end up traveling to fairy in their dream state and doing tons and tons of things. I honestly was a little bored by this book in the first like 25 to 30% of it, but the last like 60% of this book was fantastic. I really enjoyed it. It was ruthless in some ways. I love the way that like in Holly Black's books, you just are never sure how safe your characters are. There's always a level of uncertainty with the characters, and I love that about it. I also love the distinction between the fairies and the humans are very interesting, and I really enjoyed this book, and I ended up giving it 4.5 stars. So the next book on this list is Illuminae by Amie Kaufman and Kristoff. I went into this book not really expecting very much, mostly because I've read books by Kristoff before and didn't really like the tone of the books. And this book does have a very similar tone to those, but it worked just really well in this book because of the content of this book. So we're following 2 characters who are on separate spaceships. They're basically fleeing this planet that has been attacked, and there are 2 corporations that are basically at war with each other. So it's a very interesting concept. I love the concept of this book, and the 2 main characters are incredibly different, but at the same time complement each other in really interesting ways, and I love the way they interact with each other. I also do really like the way that this book is written because it's written in a mass media format, so there's just a bunch of different like formats of what's going on. I've heard that the audiobooks are really good, but I read this book physically and I like the way this book worked physically, and I really enjoyed this book. I think part of the reason why I really like this format is because you kind of get rid of that like internal monologue thing that happens a lot of times in YA, and you just kind of get to the meat and bones of the story, which I really liked. It definitely had a more joking tone at certain points, but I felt like it really worked with the teenage-like characters that are in this book, and I really enjoyed it, so I ended up giving it 4 stars. The next book on this list is 6 of Crows by Leigh Bardugo. So this book is obviously a very popular book on BookTube, and I went into this book a little skeptical just because I read the Shadow and Bone trilogy, and while I really liked it, there were a lot of aspects of the Shadow and Bone trilogy that I had issues with. This book though was so good. I love the character building in this book. I love the way the characters interact with each other, and I love how deep the world building is in one specific place, because it gave me kind of like Lies of Locke Lamora / Mistborn sort of feels, just because the plot was kind of similar to Mistborn, but the world building was more similar to the Lies of Locke Lamora. It just gave me all of the feels that I would want from a high fantasy book, and I ended up really, really loving these characters, and I'm really excited to continue on with this duology. I ended up giving this book 4.5 stars. So the next book on this list is the Firebird trilogy by Claudia Gray, which includes 1,000 Pieces of You, 10,000 Skies Above You, and 1,000,000 Worlds with You. So this series explores the many worlds theories in physics, which is the concept that for every choice that you make, there is another world in which you made that choice. And it's really interesting because in this series, there is this new technology called the Firebird, which allows a person to travel to their own body in another one of these worlds where they made a different choice. And it just gets really, really interesting. I absolutely love the world building in this series because some of these worlds are profoundly different, and then some of these worlds are very similar. So there are sections where like there'll be like one thing that is off in this world, and then there are other worlds where it's like suddenly we're in medieval Russia, and it's built so beautifully, and I absolutely love the way that it's done. There's also a really interesting romance in this series that doesn't overtake the plot of the book, and I love the way the plot is written in this series because the plot is done in mysteries and revelations, and I loved every second of it. And I ended up giving this series 4.5 stars. So now we're gonna move on to the best YA science fiction and fantasy books that I read in 2019. The first one that I wanna talk about is the Skyward series by Brandon Sanderson, which includes Skyward and Starsight. So I read both Skyward and Starsight this year, and they were fantastic. The world building in the series is jaw-droppingly good. I don't know where he comes up with these things. The world building, especially in Starsight, is fantastic, but it's really good in Skyward also. And I love the way the mysteries and revelations are done in this series as well. And I think what really makes the series for me is the main character, Spencer, because she is so ambitious and she pushes herself so hard, and she actually accomplishes a lot of what she sets out to. But she does have flaws too. She makes split-second decisions without planning ahead a lot of the times, and she strands herself a lot of the times, and she has to deal with those consequences. And I loved every second of these books. I ended up giving Skyward 5 stars and Starsight 4.5 stars, and I highly, highly recommend this series. It is a great YA sci-fi. Oh, for those of you who don't know, this series is set in a world in which the humans are kind of being contained on this planet, and they are constantly at war with this alien race called the Crow. And that's really all I want to say about it because it's amazing, and you guys should definitely pick it up and read it. The next book that's on this list is A Curse So Dark and Lonely by Brigid Kemmerer. So this is a modern Beauty and the Beast retelling. This is following a main character named Harper who has cerebral palsy, and she is taken away from her world into this magical world to meet Prince Ren, who is the Beast. And it's obviously a love story, but it's done in a very interesting way, and I love the representation in this book. And it was just such a fast-paced book. I read this book in one day, and I loved every second of it. I could not put this book down. I gave this book 4.5 stars, and I cannot wait to read the next book in this series, which is coming out next year. Like, I can't wait for it. I'm so, so excited. The next series that I want to talk about is the Arc of Scythe trilogy by Neal Shusterman, which includes Scythe, Thunderhead, and The Toll. So this is another series that I read entirely this year, and I absolutely love it. This series is set in a world where the computing power of our AI are basically infinite. So humanity has evolved beyond death, and they have these group of people called Scythes that basically kill people for population control. In the first book, we're following 2 characters named Citra and Rowan who are training to become Scythes. And this series just has some incredible world building. I absolutely love the world building in this series. I love the characters. There are some really fantastic characters in this series, especially AI characters, which are amazing, and I love them. And it also has really, really complex political situations that I absolutely love. Like, I love almost everything about the series. I gave Scythe 4.5 stars and Thunderhead and The toll 5 stars each. I absolutely love them and highly, highly recommend this series. I also heard that the series is going to be a movie and I'm so, so excited. Like, you have no idea how excited I am. I'm sad that the series is over, but I'm really excited that the movie is going to be coming out. The next book on this list is Crown of Feathers by Nicki Preto. This book blew me away when I read it for the first time. I did not expect very much from this book. Like, I didn't know what it was about. Nicki Preto is a brand new author. This is a debut novel and I loved it so much. I don't love YA fantasy as much as I love this book, but it was instantly a favorite for mine. The book is following two sisters who want to become phoenix riders. But phoenixes are very rare in this world right now, so they have to look for these phoenix eggs. They're separated quite early on in the book for reasons that I don't want to tell you because that's like one of my favorite scenes in this entire book. It is heartbreaking but amazing at the same time. And one of the sisters, Veronica, must pretend to be a boy in order to infiltrate this group that is training phoenix riders. I absolutely loved every second of this book. The relationship between these two sisters is very complex and I love that relationship. The actual plot of the story is fantastic. I loved the relationship between our main characters and some of the other characters in this book as well, and just like everything about this book blew me away the first time around. And I'm really excited to reread this book, and I'm also really, really excited for the next book in the series, which is coming out, I believe, in February. Like, I cannot wait. I ended up giving this book 5 stars, and I feel like phoenixes are like my new favorite magical creature because of this book, and I'm really, really excited for the next book in this series. And the last books on this list is the Folk of the Air trilogy by Holly Black, which includes The Cruel Prince, The Wicked King, and The Queen of Nothing. This series has just completely blown my mind this year. I talk about this series a lot, so you guys probably already know all about this series because I talk about it all the time. But it's following a main character named Jude who is orphaned at a pretty young age and has to go and live with her parents' murderer, who happens to be a fairy. So she and her sisters are raised in the fairyland, and even though she's human, she's raised as any fairy would, learning everything that they do. But because she's human, there are a lot of dangerous things for her in this world. And Jude as a main character is just fantastic. I absolutely love her. She is hardcore and she is ruthless, both to herself and the people around her. I also really love the relationship in this book because it's very will they, won't they. It's never a relationship where you're secure that it's actually going to happen or not. And I love that about it. It keeps you on your toes the entire time, and I really love the pacing in this series. I read all 3 of these books in one day. Like, I could not put this series down. I absolutely loved it. My favorite book in the series is probably The Cruel Prince, which is the first one, but The Wicked King and The Queen of Nothing are both also really fantastic, and I gave them all 5 stars. If you're only gonna read one romance-fueled YA fantasy, I highly recommend this one because even though there is a romance, it doesn't take over the plot, but there is still a really, really great romance in here, and I absolutely loved it. So those are all the books I have on this list. If you've read any of them, please let me know down in the comments. I would love to discuss it with you guys. I'm planning on posting at least 4 videos a week in the month of December, so consider subscribing. If you like this video, please give it a big thumbs up to support my channel. All social media links are in the description down below. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.